Reaching every last child. This is the mission of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, making sure that every child is protected from polio, a potentially crippling illness that can lead to meningitis, paralysis, or death. Over the last several decades, the rates of polio have decreased drastically. However, it still exists in several countries. This is a strong and meaningful goal, but how do you reach every last child? What do you do in areas where you don't know where the population is? What about in remote areas, far from populated cities? What about in areas where people have been displaced or move often? These are some of the questions that were asked recently in Somalia, where for the first time since 2014, type 2 poliovirus was detected for the first time. Along with the World Health Organization, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative put forth an effort to try to launch a vaccination campaign to make sure that every child would be reached. My colleagues in the Geospatial Research Analysis and Services program put forth an idea to help identify all of the structures within Mogadishu to reach all of the populated areas. High-resolution imagery was used, and this way we could digitize or put points on each structure so that latitude and longitude, or geocoordinates, could be applied to each building. This was really helpful because then you could quantify how many buildings there were later, and this would help in your planning, so you knew how many vaccine teams would be needed, and then also use population estimates to determine how many children and how many vaccines would be needed for those children. Knowing where people are helped designate the areas for people to be traveling to, and so the vaccine teams could have a logistical plan in place. But if you look at this map of Mogadishu, even from up here, not zooming in, you can tell that this is a highly populated area. So the next question came up: how do you digitize hundreds of thousands of buildings in a short period of time? Even for a staff of 10 to 20 people, this might take a lot of effort, and it could take weeks to complete. And since poliovirus was detected, we wanted to get this done quickly, and the vaccine campaign would launch within a few weeks. The solution used was crowdsourcing. And this is a method which uses the collective contribution of many people who all come together to support one goal. The advertisement was placed in all of the World Health Organization and CDC, and many people came together to participate. Many people from CDC were here to work on this, including a lot of EIS officers. You didn't need any mapping or GIS experience, which was great. You could just log into a computer and have internet access and be able to participate. The organizers here in GRASP would send out information on how to do this, instructional videos, and it was all a quick process. So even if you didn't know how to do this before, it would only take 5 to 10 minutes to learn how to do this. As a digitizer myself, I wanted to share with you some of the experiences that I had during this process. So first, you would log into this open map platform, and on top of the satellite images that were used, a grid would be placed. And this allowed us to work in a small area at one period of time. That way we could systematically review one spot, and we knew which area that we needed to focus in that period of time. This is an example of what it might look like when you logged in, and this could be done at any period of the 3-day period. The red squares show areas that have already been completed, and you can see the little red dots that indicate somebody has digitized a structure in that spot. The green areas are the ones that you wanted to focus in, because those are the ones that still needed to be digitized. You would check out a square, and by checking out a square, it meant that you were the only one working in that area. And this was really helpful for a crowdsourcing situation when many people were expected to be taking part at the same time. You knew what area that you were going to be working in, and it made sure that nobody else was working on that same area, placing points in the same spots at the same time. You would then start to zoom into your own area. And this example is shown in a more rural spot. The red line shows where a street is, so that can help you organize what areas you need to look in, and it might give you an idea of where you would expect to see buildings. So from up here, it kind of looks like this is an unpopulated area, and there aren't any buildings. But if you start to zoom in, buildings started to appear. And our goal was to place this point on each of these buildings. So you just take your mouse and click a point on top and not assign the geocoordinates to give it a referencing so that we could look back at these spots later and we knew where people were living. Later, once you had finished, you would put a point on all the structures. You would then mark this as completed. And this meant that nobody would go into that spot again to redo it, except for somebody who came in later to validate. So you get a second pair of eyes on this map area. From my point of view as a fellow digitizer, I thought this was a fun experience. It also reminded me of similar childhood fun when I'd be looking for hidden items in another image. The other great part about this Mapathon experience is that there was always somebody you could ask a question to. And I asked many, because sometimes you didn't know if there was a spot that you were supposed to be placing. This was really helpful because somebody from the CDC or the World Health Organization would be available to answer your questions. This is an example of one of the questions you might see. We could come in and post images from online and show screenshots of what we were looking at. This example is in a very densely populated area. And the question was asked, how do we know which buildings represent buildings? We can't always tell where one ends and the next begins. And somebody would answer and respond, just try to look at the roof divisions, and that will help tell you where to place the dots on each point. You might see similar things like this too, where buildings were under construction, or it might be hard to tell if they were still existing there because of the satellite imagery may not be as high. So you could come and paste these questions again. And somebody would respond back, yes, please still digitize these structures, and we'll make a note of these for somebody who's an expert also to come in and validate those spots again. They also posted helpful hints that you might see as you were doing this process. So somebody came here and posted, this looks like an abandoned village. So this would be an area that you do not need to digitize because we are pretty certain that nobody lives here anymore. There's also a place for posting interesting finds, like this one, which is, forget Waldo, I think I found a giraffe here in the trees. The other nice thing about the Slack channel is that updates were sent out regularly, so we could tell how many grids had been completed and how many were still left to go. And this gave us an idea, okay, we're making progress, we're getting to the end, and we know how much more we have to go to help in that process. You could also see the individual squares that still needed to have work done in them, so you could go back in to focus on those areas. Due to the hard work of 158 volunteers, over 270,000 buildings were identified in just a 72-hour period. This helped to quantify the buildings that were in Mogadishu. And per grid square, this was compared to the population count, so we could estimate how many people might be living in each structure. After this process was completed, a validation team would be sent out into the field, and places were randomly selected so that you could compare the digitized points to existing maps. This also helped provide estimates of how many children may have been missed if we had not digitized those spots. This was just the start of the vaccine campaign. Now that we know where people are, the vaccine teams could organize microplans, and this is an example of one of the hand-drawn maps that teams use when they go out into the field. It's a logistical pattern of how they'll approach the community to reach every family. More recently, we participated in a second Mapathon in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This was a 2-day-long quest, trying to digitize areas in both populated and remote areas of the country that have been labeled high risk due to recent polio virus detection. The map here on the left is an existing microplan. So before we had even done any of the digitizing, this was one of the maps that existed. And it shows the logistics of 4 different teams. What they noticed when they compared this existing map to the digitized points was that over 10 villages would have been missed if this original map had been used instead of the new maps. So with those digitized points, we were able to include the other 10 villages and many children who would have been missed if we had not extended the boundaries for those teams. And this was just 4 of the teams. So this is a lot of children that may have been missed if they had not had these digitized points. This time, 309 volunteers participated, and over 385,000 structures were identified in just a 2-day period. For me, this experience really emphasized the point of what you can do when people come together to support a public health need. And this method could be used in other areas of public health and disaster and emergency preparedness. From our small fingers clicking away on a mouse on a map in Atlanta, to the small fingers of the little children with the purple dots on their fingers showing that they've been vaccinated. Together, we can help eradicate polio virus once and for all.